Before this trip I had a very difficult experience with 4-ACO-DMT, so I decided to take some time to understand what I was going through, and better integrate the previous trips. I dedicated myself as well to read some books from Stanislav Grof and James Fadiman to understand more about LSD and other well-known psychedelics, as well as some other books from Leo's book list about God and spirituality. I also worked on improving my Kriya Yoga techniques and have been observing my micro-fears and contemplating how these fears are related to myself. Finally, I contacted a psychotherapist, which helped me during some earlier hard phases of my life, because I started to get anxious with the psychedelic trips and some personal stuff started to come during the trips, which I was not able to integrate alone. The trip. I made all preparations and took the LSD around 8 AM. After that I made Kriya Yoga. I managed to get to 30 minutes, but I started to feel the effects of the medicine and started to feel a little dizzy. I find it interesting that the peaceful and afterglow of Kriya somehow merged with the effect of the LSD. I also made some Hatha Yoga because the LSD gets me some muscle soreness, and I've realised that Hatha Yoga helps me relax the body and allows the energy to flow better. I then laid down as the effects of the medicine were getting stronger, and started to ask myself, how am I God? I also started to become aware of the rapid movements of my ego mind, and I managed to calm it down. I had this very deep insight about nothingness. It was a very profound insight, but I'll try my best to describe it. I realised all the limitations that make me believe that I am a person, and realised I had to overcome them in order to become God. As I realised this, I had this vision of my body being fully surrounded by white energy, and how all the limitations simply disappeared. And then I became nothingness. I don't really know how long I stayed in this state, as time had no meaning there. It was like as if I was in the void. There was no difference. It was absolute nothingness. Later I went to see how much time had passed since I first laid down, and I spent at least 2 hours there. Suddenly I see how I decide to go back to the form and create myself, and as this happens I have this vision that the nothingness merges again with the white energy of love, like a multi-dimensional living yin-yang, and it creates a strange loop and I become this strange loop. As I realise the insight, I sit there completely shocked, and I see how my mind tries to wrap around and make an idea of it which is impossible. I tried to write about the experience, and it came to my mind that it is impossible to describe infinity with something as finite as words. Nevertheless, there are some moments of great inspiration I feel during the trips. Here is something I wrote down and I wanted to share. It is as if God could talk to me through music, thoughts, light, in all the many dimensions of the self, and it manages to do it so overwhelmingly good that it leaves me breathless. I became a little agitated because of the magnitude of this insight, so I started to walk around in the apartment and later made some more Hatha Yoga. It felt as if I was a puppet being shown how to make the yoga positions. I wanted to lay down again and I realised that my ego self didn't want me to do it and became agitated. I realised that I was also contracting my body and opened up and started to make bilateral symmetrical movements, and I managed to calm down. I am really amazed how easy this technique is, and yet how helpful it is in such cases. I managed to calm down and relax. I wore some earplugs and tried to be as still as I could. I had one of these samadhi experiences I have been having with the psychedelic trips. As I relaxed the mind, the limits of my body ceased to exist, and I literally feel I have no limits. During that moment I also experience a lot of love, and it feels as if I would elevate and leave my body. I guess that this is the sort of experiences that yogis get after many years of practice. There was also a moment when I felt I could remember who I truly am, not as my ego self, but as the higher self. I could feel I was infinity, infinite love, eternal. It was just awesome. I also realised that there is no such thing as a reference point, and that everything is relative, except for the absolute. As I got this realisation, I started to feel disoriented and fearful. My body wanted to close again, but I managed to remain open, make some bilateral movements so I could accept the insight and continue tripping. There was also a moment when I was at the kitchen and started looking at a mango. I became fascinated with its different colours and textures, and at some point I realised that by concentrating myself on the mango, I became the mango. I just don't know how to put this into words, but it felt like that. At the end of the trip I started listening to some music, something I've learned to enjoy especially when I do LSD, and there were some moments that I feel I became the musician playing the instrument and the music. I then went for a walk into the forest. I felt drawn into the nature. Part of me wanted to see and be part of nature. So I spent a couple of hours walking and flowing with the constant changes of the wind, captivated by the fractal forms of some plants and the beauty of nature, looking at the awesome colours of the leaves now that the fall begins here in Europe. In conclusion, I felt I had much more of an organic trip. As in my previous trips, I could not remain so conscious of all the insights I got. I see that working on my fears has helped me go deeper during the trips. There were some moments where I felt I was drawing towards madness, but I saw that the only way I could get over my fears is to face them, and that it is a long and slow process. I was reluctant and sceptical to contact the psychotherapist, but working on some more personal stuff that has come up during some previous experiences has also allowed me to go deeper during this trip. But then again, it is a therapist that I have known for years, which could accept the idea of me working with psychedelics, even though she may not recommend it or like them, and someone I can also trust. Bilateral symmetry and remaining open is a great technique to avoid getting anxious during the trip. Well, at least it works for me, and I can't recommend it enough. Something I don't like about 1P-LSD is the muscle soreness and body load it generates, but I could counteract some of it by doing hatha yoga, something that may be manageable at least in lower to moderate doses where it is still possible to move around. When I started working with psychedelics at the beginning of the year, I was afraid I would not be able to do this with my girlfriend around, and that it may even cause us trouble. But to my surprise, it has been the complete opposite. I have learned to understand her better and get closer in our relationship.